On a snowy Christmas Eve in 1945, the Sodder family's home in rural West Virginia was consumed by fire. But what should have been a tragic, but ordinary house fire turned into a mystery that has never been solved. 5 children vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions, and a family left searching for answers that still elude them to this day. What happened to the Sodder children? It was Christmas Eve, 1945, when the Sodder family's home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, caught fire. George and Jenny Sodder, along with 9 of their children, were inside the house. But when the fire was extinguished, only 4 children were found safe. 5 were missing. They would never be seen again. Inside the Sodder household, the family was in high spirits. The children were playing with their new Christmas toys, and George and Jenny were preparing for the holiday. But a faint smell of smoke would soon disrupt the night. The family had no idea that their lives were about to be changed forever. Suddenly, smoke filled the air. The fire spread quickly, engulfing the house. George and Jenny rushed to the children's rooms, calling their names, but the smoke was thick, and the flames were spreading faster than they could escape. By the time the fire department arrived, the house had been nearly destroyed. But in the aftermath of the fire, something was strange. The 5 missing children had left no trace behind. The fire was intense, but it didn't make sense. Typically, the remains of people who perish in a house fire are identifiable. Yet, there was no sign of the 5 Sodder children. Their beds were untouched, their belongings were intact. It was as though they had simply vanished. For George and Jenny, the shock of losing their children was compounded by the inexplicable circumstances of their disappearance. Could the children have perished in the fire, or was there something more sinister at play? As investigators began to sift through the aftermath, they found strange inconsistencies. George, who had been fighting the fire, noticed that the phone lines had been cut before the fire started. And neighbors reported seeing a suspicious car parked near the house earlier that evening. Some believed that the fire was deliberately set to cover up a kidnapping. And with the phone lines cut, the family couldn't call for help or warn the authorities. Had the Sodder children been taken before the fire even started? The investigation into the children's disappearance turned up few leads. But in the years that followed, George and Jenny would not give up. They continued searching for their children, even offering a reward for information about their whereabouts. And then, new and disturbing clues began to surface. One day, a woman claimed to have seen the missing children after the fire. She said she saw them in a car with 2 men, just hours after the fire had started. Was this a credible sighting, or another piece in a puzzling mystery? We believed in what she said. There were so many unanswered questions. The fire was the beginning, but the search for answers didn't end that night. As years went by, the search for the missing Sodder children continued, but the trail grew cold. Theories flourished, from mob involvement to accidental disappearance, but none were ever proven. The case remained an enigma. There was no concrete evidence to suggest what happened to the children. But there were too many signs, too many red flags, to dismiss it as just a tragic fire. The Sodder family was convinced their children had been taken, and they never stopped searching. In the years following the fire, the Sodder family continued to receive strange phone calls. One man claimed to have seen the children alive, living far away in another state. Another individual sent them a photo of a young woman they believed could have been one of the missing children. But none of these leads ever panned out. Perhaps the most chilling piece of evidence came years after the fire, when a photograph was sent anonymously to the Sodder family. It was a picture of a woman who appeared to resemble their missing daughter, Betty. Was it her? Or was it a cruel hoax? The mystery of the Sodder children's disappearance has never been solved. Over 70 years have passed, but the family's search for the truth never stopped. Was it a tragic accident? A kidnapping orchestrated by someone close to the family? Or something more sinister? For George and Jenny Sodder, the heartache never faded. They never gave up hope that their children would one day come home. And for the world, the disappearance of the Sodder children remains a haunting mystery, one that challenges everything we think we know about fate, fire, and family.